Hello and welcome to Rock Paper Shotgun. You are currently watching State of Decay 2 and listening to the voice of RPS video person Matthew. Now, I've played about 3 hours of the game across the single player and 4-person co-op, but in this video we're going to serve up about 20 minutes of solo action to give you a taste of everything new. If you are completely new to State of Decay, it's an open world zombie survival game, but unlike other games in the survival genre, it's got a bit more shape to it, it's a bit more story driven. But what it does that's quite nice is all its story missions are sort of procedurally generated based on the sort of scenarios you find yourself in. So if you need particular materials, it'll kind of build story missions around that. Or if you have certain people living in your community, you get missions based on them. So, for example, in this case, we're playing as Ruben, who was a member of my community, kind of randomly generated from a sort of series of different personality traits that we'll look at a bit later. And he wants to break into a garden centre, because that's how all exciting zombie films start. It's on a moment-to-moment basis. It's quite a straightforward third-person action game. You know, you've got quite basic melee attacks with various weapons. You can do over-the-shoulder shooting. It's nothing too complicated, very easy to kind of grasp the basics of just moving around and not getting chomped on. What makes it a bit more complicated is that there are a few interesting things being sort of simulated in the background. So, for example, the noise you make is represented on the little mini map in the bottom left by the circles kind of emitting from things. So, melee attacks are, going to make some sort of meaty thudding sounds but aren't too loud. But if you start firing the gun, you're going to have a much greater range of sound on that, and it will draw more zombies in. So there's this kind of risk-reward thing of, how do you actually kind of take on these things. You can actually try and sneak in, but for the sake of a video, I didn't think you wanted to watch me sneaking around a garden centre, so I've not done that. But you can kind of crouch and stab things in the back of the head. I think we may see a little bit of that later. Just outside, you can see that there are lots of dots on the mini-map pinging. They're actually fighting another member of the community called Bill, who's an NPC character I've brought along for the ride. This kind of gives you a little hint of how the kind of co-op works in the game, in that you can kind of enlist other people into your party. When people come into your game to play, they're very much guests in your world, so the things that they're helping you progress, it's your story that's going forward. You're doing the missions. Obviously, the missions in their world are going to be completely different. So the benefit for them is that they may find like rare materials. Obviously, working with other people feels generally easier. The developers say it's kind of slightly balanced out by the fact that the more people are, there's more chance of someone messing up and drawing in a zombie horde, which is true, but at the same time, like, you tend to do much better in co-op, just sort of strength in numbers. It doesn't actually scale the zombie threat as far as I can see. In this particular mission, we're just raiding the supplies to take back to the base. Really, the thrust of a lot of these missions, while I say they are procedurally generated, what it's really doing is just telling you to go to locations to collect a certain type of material that will be there. It's not the most sort of complicated thing in the world. We hop back to the base now, and we've activated another one of these sort of procedurally generated missions, this one to scavenge materials in Spring Rock, which is just another location on the map. Let's actually talk a little bit about the map. If you played the first game, it had this one big area that you kind of explored. One of the things where they've really grown out the sequel is, have 3 areas. Each area is roughly the size of the original game's map, so it's quite substantial. In this particular preview build, we actually had the freedom to go anywhere and do any of the maps. From the start of the game, you have freedom to do that. You go and sort of set up a base somewhere, and then you're basically free to kind of tackle that area's problems. This particular map's called Meagher Valley, and it's like sort of farmland, very rural, lots of nice sort of open fields. Reminds me a little bit of sort of Far Cry 5 country when you're kind of barreling through it, but it's actually a little easier to navigate just because you can kind of charge your car through pretty much everything. Cars are, as a general point, incredibly overpowered. Again, I sort of raised this with the developers, and they said that it's balanced by the fact that cars are very noisy, they're going to draw attention. Also, cars are finite in the world, so there's only a fixed number of them. Once they've all been broken and you've busted them all up, or you've run out of fuel, you're really screwed. But while you have them, they're basically these sort of amazing battering rams. I think one of the challenges of playing a game like this in a preview build is that the whole narrative of State of Decay, the whole experience of it's going to build up gradually over many hours. As you kind of use resources, you become more desperate. But when you're only playing for 3 hours, like little window of time, you don't really feel the need to kind of protect things. So you charge around in the cars, you fire off loads of shots, you use all your health packs. So it's not like truly indicative of the kind of tensions that you're going to be facing. But even so, like I had one car that got me pretty much through the whole 3 hours that I was playing, and I was having to refuel it and fix it as I went along. But I found those materials were relatively easy to come by. This particular mission, though, I just wanted to show off, like, when you go scavenging, you can approach things slightly differently. In that last clip, everything was kind of kicking off already. There were lots of zombies there. Here, though, you're breaking into a kind of building site. You haven't really been spotted, and you can take the slightly more stealthy approach. Different characters have different traits that sort of give them experience in different areas of the game. Some are amazing with guns, some are really great at melee combat, some are very sort of able to sneak around. It's pretty simple sneaking mechanics. So, you just sort of creep up and press a button and off they go. Even so, when things kick off, you're pretty capable, as long as there's no more than 2 or 3 things attacking you at any given time. You can kind of hold your own. Every character has like a core melee weapon, so if there's breaks, you're safe. But that was a pretty smooth infiltration there. Once you've got the resources, you take them back to your base, which is what I'm demonstrating here. One of the really cool things about State of Decay is that you have the option to build your base on a series of different sites, and each site brings different sort of values, different sort of site-specific facilities. The way base building works is that you have these sort of square units of land that you can build on. Some sites have more, some have less, some have sort of fixed elements that you can't remove. In this case, we've actually decided to build inside a baseball field, which is pretty good from a defensive position because it's got the kind of wall around the back and it forces all the zombies in the front where we've got these fixed gun kind of emplacements. It hasn't got much to build on the inside. Like I've got a medical bay, I've built a farm to generate food. Hilariously, if you actually look up at the resources menu, you can see that food is represented by pizza, which seems like a really strange choice because there's absolutely no pizza in this zombie apocalypse land. This is about a year and a half after the zombie first arrived, so the idea that there's still pizzas in action is quite unrealistic. You can then build up these units based on different sort of things, resources that you find in the field. This is the community menu. This is where you can see the people. They're all procedurally generated, and it's based on a series of traits that then give them skills. So, for example, this woman here is a research assistant with prize-winning chili, which means she's very resourceful and also very good at cooking. And one of the really fun things is seeing like what traits each survivor's going to have and how it reflects. Some of them are quite strange. This guy's a coffee connoisseur. In another save file I looked at, I had a Hollywood stuntman who was obviously amazing at fighting, presumably pretend fighting. But this guy, he can make coffee, which means if you have a kitchen, he can unlock some sort of bespoke activities there. Not all traits are equal, You ideally want people who are really good with guns, really good with melee combat. This guy's a juggler, which is pretty good, I guess, if you've got kids to entertain, like a general kind of morale booster who doesn't enjoy a bit of juggling. But one of the really fun things is just seeing kind of what you get, what that means, where that takes your story. Like, I think you have to kind of pursue the community you're given rather than kind of going curses. This isn't a very good one. It means that every time you play, you'll be forced down slightly different routes based on the kind of materials you're given, which is all part of this kind of this procedurally generated story that they like to talk up. Here we are on our way to tackle a plague heart. These are quite kind of key to the story, it seems. In every area of the game, the general sort of thrust or rhythm of the story seems to be you move in, you build up a base, you do some sort of smaller missions for other survivors, some little kind of sort of side mission kind of stuff, and then you tackle the plague hearts. I think these could be tackled at any time, but in this particular case, one of the characters in my community, his sort of specific story mission has drawn me here. I came a little unprepared. There was this sort of screaming zombie which drew loads of other zombies to the area, and I think there's also a big bloaty zombie, in true, yeah, there he is, in true Left 4 Dead fashion. There are sort of special zombie types which do a lot more damage. This particular one spewed toxic gas all over my car, and it's eating into my health quite severely. I've also been permanently injured, that little orange mark up there, so until I kind of properly heal myself, I'm going to be at a disadvantage. One of the things that happens in the game is that as you play, characters can get fatigued or they can get injured more seriously, and it kind of impacts their overall ability to kind of recover. But anyway, I'm still going to tackle this plague heart. I must admit, at this particular point, I didn't know how dangerous these things were going to be, so I was a little blasé about wandering into this garage. I just thought, what could possibly go wrong? But as you can see, it all goes horribly wrong. This is me smashing into the plague heart, which draws everything in the area. The thing to watch out for now is this little meter that's opened up just above the minimap. This is actually your blood plague infection. So every time you're attacked by one of the blood plague zombies, you become a little bit more infected. If this bar fills all the way to the top, you're properly infected with blood plague, which means you will inevitably turn into a zombie unless your team can kind of heal you, or you can develop the medical facility to develop a cure, which is obviously feels like quite late game developments. I had nothing like that. When you're in this state, you're naturally weaker. You also become quite a challenge for the community, because if you're going to be embedded in the base, you're going to gradually get sick, then turn into a zombie, and it will constantly tell you, a member of your community is sick, this is going to be a big problem. The actual mission itself, I managed to rinse with flame grenades, which was lucky, because I really thought I was going to die here. But it now did leave me with this survivor who's a big problem. You can just switch to another player and euthanize this guy, but I thought that was a little unfair, so I'm going to take him back to the base and try and heal him up. The problem is, while they're healing, you can kind of put them into the medical bay, and that'll kind of stop the infection from spreading, but it comes at like a huge cost. It's like 2 medical supplies per hour, and those things are quite hard to come by. So it's kind of a case of like, can you afford to have this drain on your resources? This guy's particularly good. He's got really high stats, so he is valuable, but he's going to be a bit of a problem. And again, one of the problems of the preview build is that you don't really get to see that story play out in full. Like I came to an end session wise about half an hour later, and he was still sick back at the base. But I imagine you're going to get yourself into situations where you're going to have to decide to execute quite key members of your community. You can exile them as well, which I could have done, but yeah, I'm intrigued to see how that kind of rhythm plays out in the full game, because this idea of the infection in your community is, it's such a key trope in zombie fiction, and to see that kind of dilemma played out properly could be really cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out in the final game. Back at the base, having defeated the plague heart, we're going to see a different sort of procedural story moment play out. Yes, zombie threat at home. Prepare for the zombie attack on your home. They're going to kind of come at you. Again, this is just triggered by you coming back. You know, there's a sort of sense of a slightly sort of sadistic director behind the scenes because it knows that I'm injured. I want to deal with this blood plague. I get home and now you're going to have to deal with these people coming in. What I'm trying to do here is check in the chap who you just saw fighting the plague heart into the medical bay. This means switching to a number member of the community because remember, you don't have a main character in this game. You are just whoever you are at any given moment, which means I can check him in just in time for him to be totally rubbish and useless at fighting off zombies as they come busting in. Luckily, my community is very gun friendly. They are really on top of this stuff. This community, you know, its major weakness is that it has like no medical expertise whatsoever, so I'm really stuck with sick people, but they are very, very good at holding the fort. They're very good at kind of protecting themselves, and the more they protect themselves, the better they get at it because they begin to level up those skills. So, you know, there's a really nice kind of cycle here of them keeping themselves safe. One of the things I should point out, as in the first State of Decay, there is permadeath. So when a community member dies, they're gone for good. It doesn't actually happen in this video because I'm just too damn good at playing or something. And but what that means is obviously you can lose quite a vital voice in the community. You can lose the skills that they brought. You know, the more community members you have, the more resources you're going to need to kind of keep them fed, keep them healthy. But at the same time, you have like a bigger pool of people to kind of dip into. So there's this kind of question of what the optimal size for a community is going to be. Personally, you know, you could be really brutal about it and just kind of exile anyone who doesn't have traits which are going to be valuable to you, but there is stuff going on under the hood to make sure that it doesn't skew one way or the other, that there will be, you know, there will be good characters, there will be bad characters, and you should really kind of deal with them all. But I am intrigued to see how our different communities play out. We finish off our little trip into the world of State of Decay 2 with a bit of nighttime driving. What I really like about the nighttime stuff in the game is how dark it is, which I know sounds really obvious, but it's extraordinarily dark. If you don't have a flashlight or you don't have the car lights, you really can't see much, and it's quite atmospheric because you end up walking around this landscape and you can just see these great big looming silhouettes, and this isn't a game where you can just sort of sleep the time away. You know, everything's ticking down, especially when you've got infected back at home. You can't just waste 12 hours until the time is slightly friendlier and there's more light up. So it just creates the closest the game has to a kind of horror feeling. I wouldn't say it was ever scary, but it's definitely like super tense. It would have helped if I'd turned on my flashlight at this particular point. In this case, you know, I'm fighting another one of the plague hearts, so you know it's especially difficult because it's going to have all those zombies swarming on me. But yeah, it just made for a very different flavour, a very different vibe to the daytime action that you've seen elsewhere in the video. So there are a lot of new ideas going on in State of Decay 2, but what this preview build maybe doesn't show us is how they're all going to kind of interact and collide over a longer campaign. You know, taken alone, there's lots of cool stuff. There's the new character traits, there's the new base building options, there's this nocturnal stuff, the plague hearts, there's the blood plague infection that's going to cause you problems, but you really need to see how these things are going to kind of unfold over many hours, how they're going to kind of accumulate over time to cause you problems. You know, such a key part of this game's appeal is seeing the story develop, your own story develop in it, and that's what I really need to kind of play the full game to feel. You know, I had a lot of fun with my 3 hours, but I didn't necessarily get the impression of what the start, middle and end of those stories is going to feel like. But then we only have 3 weeks to wait until we can see how it all holds together. The game comes out on May 22nd and we will have a lot more on this closer to the time. We'll get some co-op going so you can see how that all holds together. Thanks for watching this video. Please do subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun for all your PC gaming needs, and we will see you again soon. Bye.